Good afternoon. Just thought I would introduce this topic on my live channel. Live, Facebook business page. I'm going to probably end up tightening up this presentation and putting it on YouTube because it's kind of an important question. It came by request, so I'm going to answer it. Because there's a lot of stuff out there. We use the term alpha male a lot. I use it all the time. People use it, and there's different ideas of what that is. Some people with a more gynocentric mindset might think the term alpha male is, kind of a douchebag term, right? And then there's other people that really put the term alpha on this pedestal like it's the ultimate of what you could be as a person, and there's all different ways of looking at it. But what does it really mean? What is it? You know what I mean? So I look at it from a anthropological point of view and a scientific point of view, rather than just an internet opinion dating site point of view. Okay, so I'm gonna come at you with definitions from that angle, from the scientific community, as it applied to the animal kingdom, and then some of the problems we run into with applying those definitions to us as human beings. All right. So the term alpha is, you can be alpha male or alpha female. All right. An alpha pair is usually when you have a alpha male and an alpha female that are mating together. Okay, so that's an alpha pair, and alpha indicates social dominance and influence. Okay, now that social dominance and influence can be it is within a particular social circle. So that social dominance and influence could be with the use of physicality, being physically superior, and aggression. Okay, so being more physically superior and more aggressive. All right, and also it's a balance between aggression and physicality and social influence, because they're not always the same thing. And if you want to see how that applies in the animal kingdom and look for great analogies to how human beings are, you can look at any work by Franz de Waal. He wrote Chimpanzee Politics in the 80s, and he's written a few other books since then. He observes chimpanzees, gorillas, he observes primates and the social order and dominance hierarchies amongst primates. But it's the way he writes is very interesting, because he demonstrates how those social dominance hierarchies apply to human beings. So that's a very good resource, and he is a scientist, and he does use the term alpha male, so it's not just some made-up definition by people in a manosphere or people in the pickup community. Okay, so that is what alpha basically means. Then you have beta male, which is a beta is just a less dominant, less socially influential male. Okay, so they will tend to try to gain power through submission. All right, or power through being less dominant. So you can see this in the sexual marketplace, for example, as a beta presenting nice guy traits to try to get the woman and mate, versus dominant traits. That would be an example. Okay. Now you have also two other categories that aren't talked about very often. One is the omega male. Okay, the omega can be seen can be seen amongst wolves and primates too, and that tends to be the runt of the litter and the most the scapegoat of that particular tribe or social circle. Okay, it's the person who is ostracized. I wouldn't say ostracized. They're within the tribe, and they're on the lowest of the social order, and they tend to be the one that's abused or scapegoated or used for comic relief, or essentially the lowest in all of the orders. It's usually the least dominant, and oftentimes the least physically dominant as well. The person who gets bullied, okay, that's who the omega male is. Your incels, okay, those are your omega males. School shooters are omega males that finally lose their shit, okay. So that is what an omega male is, and it's well observed and established within the animal community. What's also established in the animal community, at least amongst wolves, and I need to probably research a little more on this one, but it's something called the Sigma male. Now, Sigma males, there's a whole like subculture of dudes who are promoting this idea, and again, it's all about, you know, finding an archetype and then promoting it as being the end all be all. So, you know, Sigma male, that's what you have to be like, you know. And there's a bunch of, you know, YouTubers out there talking about that. But so what is it? But who cares about that? What is that even real? You know, like it's what is real though is how it applies, at least when it comes in terms of wolf packs. And I know we're human beings, we're not wolves, but I'll get to that in a second. Is that the Sigma male is basically your lone wolf. So it's not your omega male. So you have your omega males who could have been ostracized from their pack, okay? But those tend to be the least dominant of all the males or females, and they tend to die off rather quickly, okay? Because they don't have, they tend to, you know, not do too well, depending. It depends. Whereas your Sigma male it could have been someone. We'll use the wolf example. It's for some circumstantial reason, and it might be ostracization, it might not be. Okay, that wolf ends up on its own. All right. So the wolf's on its own, but it's not an omega male. It's not a weaker male or a weaker female for that matter. Okay, I'm still using the term male, but these can apply to male or female. It's not the weaker amongst other wolves. It's just alone by itself. So it has to, and it could have been that it was a dominant alpha that conflicted with another dominant alpha within a pack, and then got ostracized from that point, because basically the rest of the beta males in the pack sided with that alpha male, and ended up being that you know, Sigma male got ostracized. Now the Sigma males what's been observed is they'll often mate or find other wolves or another wolf pack, and then they end up taking over that pack. So they can be you know, there you go. They can be you know, become this alpha male by definition of another pack. You know what I mean? Or they can just stay living on their own, you know, for the rest of their lives. And they usually hunt smaller game, and they survive on their own. So that's a Sigma male. Now, these are all defined in the animal community. And so how does it apply to us, you know, as human beings? Well, okay, the reason why there's a lot of controversy as to whether this applies to human beings. The controversy is because as human beings, we're more advanced in our social orders, and we're more advanced in our rational thinking. So we don't comfortably fit into these categories, one or the other, within our social orders. And the reason for that is really because we exist in multiple social orders. So a great example is somebody could be an alpha male because they're the CEO at their work. And so their ability in business and at work, and the way they operate and function within their company is more alpha. They're the leader of that particular social circle. But then they go into their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class twice a week, and they're the white belt. So they're the beta male, weaker beta male within that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu social circle, and some black belt happens to be the alpha male placeholder for that social circle. You know what I mean? And so that's how, like, different social circles, you'll have different social leaders. So you could be the alpha male or female in one group, and then be more or less the beta in another, okay? Because you're just learning, or you're new to the group, or whatever it may be. And with human beings too, because of our complex social abilities, you can have multiple alphas in a same environment, arguably, and they get along through basically treaties, okay, or agreements. So there's clear boundaries set amongst other alphas that, hey, like, I don't just follow you and your tribe. You don't just follow me and my tribe, okay? But we have a social order. We can still work together towards a common goal, and then there's clear boundaries for how we end up working together. And then that's, in that sense, you can have friends amongst alphas with human beings, where as in the animal kingdom, they don't have the ability to have a treaty, with each other. So they, so there isn't a bunch of alpha friends amongst gorillas, for example. All right, and so the reason why it becomes harder, it's not really harder. It just depends on the paradigm you're looking at. You have really a gynocentric view of the world that wants to say that the alpha thing isn't real as it applies to human beings, but that is because they're promoting an egalitarian society, or an blank slate equalism, which doesn't exist. We know that there is people that are more talented or dominant in every social circle, and we know that there's people who are bullied, for example, who are those omegas, and we work to protect those people so that they're not bullied, right? And so we know that these social hierarchies exist, and we operate within them all the time. You know what I mean? And so to pretend they don't exist, that's to say there's no such thing as an alpha male as far as human beings are concerned, and to promote that idea, it's understand that what you're promoting is an egalitarian society, or basically blank slate equalism, which is that we're all equal no matter what, in terms of talents, abilities, strengths, weaknesses, and that somehow, if we don't see it that way, that's some sort of social construct. But we know that that's not true. I know that if I get in a circle of people right now who are professional basketball players, I am going to be the beta of that community because I suck at basketball. You know what I mean? So that's just a fact. Now, I might be, I could be seen as more of the sigma male, or maybe an alpha male I usually end up being the alpha male treating with other alpha males because I don't listen and I'm stubborn. You know what I mean? But that being said, it's a little more complex when we have the ability to have more complex social orders. But just because it's more complex, that doesn't mean that these social orders don't exist. You know what I mean? So when we talk about being more alpha, for example, in terms of dating and relationships, I'm really applying that. It becomes a placeholder term because we're applying it to only one social circle. That social circle being the sexual marketplace. Okay, so that social circle being all the available mates, people that could mate with each other that are out there. Are you amongst, your peers and other people, are you the more sexually marketable? Are you the more dominant of that? Or are you lower on that? Or are you more of an incel, more of an omega, right? And so that's what we're talking about. And we're striving to be more of the alpha in our relationships. We're saying that we want to be the more, as males anyway, we want to be the most sexually marketable. We want to be dominant in our relationships. We want to be socially influential. Now, understand that dominance does not mean just being a jackass, because if you look again at Franz de Waal's work, he mentions a number of examples where there's the more physically aggressive and dominant chimpanzees that were ostracized or knocked down out of their alpha position. And they were knocked off their alpha position by a team or one or two other betas, and then another alpha, and then one of those betas got elected more or less to be the alpha of that pack or tribe. Okay, and the reason why is because basically though that chimp was the more physically dominant in the group, he was also a dickhead. He wasn't a benevolent leader, so he got knocked off of that position. And sometimes if an alpha is not good at being socially influential and just aggressive and dominant, they'll get knocked out of that position, and when they lose that power, they turn into the omega. We can see this in the human world with Saddam Hussein is a great example. Saddam Hussein was the alpha male of the group in his country. okay? But he wasn't a benevolent leader. He was a terrorizing dictator. So once he was removed from power, he essentially turned into the Omega male. He turned into somebody who was powerless, and he was rendered powerless by the society at whole, and he was ostracized or isolated as being the worst person on earth to a lot of people. And then he was executed, you see. So that's the consequence. You can't just being an alpha male doesn't just mean walking in and being the biggest asshole in the room and being the most aggressive and the most physically dominant. Physical dominance and aggression does play a role, but you have to balance it within the social order. You have to balance it with social influence, because if not, and we see it in the animal kingdom as well as amongst humans, you'll get knocked off that pedestal and you'll find yourself losing in the end usually, okay, if you can't balance out the society around you. So anyway, that's a little education on all of the different categories. It does exist, you know what I mean? But when we talk about it again in terms of relationships, I'm not talking about whether or not you're the black belt or the white belt in your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, or whether or not you're the employee or the employer in your work. When I talk about alpha and beta, I'm talking about more or less characteristics that could apply in any environment that you're in. Do you know what I mean? And so that's what we're talking about. Even though you may be a placeholder of a less dominant position in some of your environments that you're in. And so that is, hear that? That's my dog cage back there. So he obviously decided to move around and kick his bowl over. Anyway, but yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking at. And if we're talking about within our relationships, we're striving as males to have to be that alpha dominant leader amongst within the sexual marketplace, so that the woman that you're with, sees you as her best sexual option, And for females, we're talking about being a good, it depends, either being a good beta or being a good alpha partner, depending on the power dynamic in that relationship. And I'm not going to tell you which power dynamic is right or wrong, because that's very, very individualized. Okay, well, I see a number of people tuned in, so it obviously sparked some interest. I'm gonna probably, like I said, redo this in a less me driving and more well thought out format, you could say. All right, but thanks for tuning in. Hopefully that answered some questions for a lot of you guys who've wondered about these questions. All right, thank you.